10 o'clock.
10 o'clock.
Hello, good morning, and welcome to the second in our webinar series for the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association. Today we're discussing the topic of increasing local ownership in tourism. Is it achievable? And with me, I have a really fantastic panel comprising hotelier Gordon Seal, Josea Browne, who's a tourism consultant, Mahmoud Patel, who's an entrepreneur, and Rohan, who's going to be our financial consultant for this call. I want to welcome all of our panelists and all of our viewers online. I want to invite you to please feel free to submit any questions for our Q&A section via slido.com, #BHTA. My name is Renée Coppin, and I'm the first vice chairman of the BHTA. I want to start by talking about tourism because it returns to the forefront in our discussion in this second webinar, not just because of our role in the BHTA as the premier private sector tourism organization in Barbados, but also because of the critical role that tourism plays in the economy of this island. Tourism directly employs over 16,000 people, and that number skyrockets to over 45,000 if the indirect employment is considered. It contributes 40% of our gross domestic product, both directly and indirectly. It truly and literally fits the well-known adage, tourism is our business. However, how much of that business is truly ours? Does our in this message refer to ownership, as in belongs to us, or does it more accurately depict spectatorship? Are we as Barbadians the ones who really have title to tourism businesses, or do we just carry titles in these businesses? The Caribbean is rated as one of the most tourism-dependent regions in the world. Yet one estimate has suggested that 2/3 of our hotel stock in the region are foreign-owned. Much of the business in the region is driven by foreign tour operators, and many of the tour companies which arrange our visitors' activities are also foreign-owned. Much of our five-star and luxury accommodation in the region is supplied by large global chains. While a proliferation of multinational chains has never been our experience and a significant feature of the Barbadian tourism product, the trend of foreign ownership in our luxury segment here is still quite prevalent. Of the BHTA membership, 17 luxury members, only 3 can claim to be locally owned. This leads to a phenomenon in the sector known as tourism leakage, which means that tourism dollars, instead of staying in the local economy, actually benefit multinational corporations, foreign companies, and countries more than they benefit our local economy. The UN estimates that for every US $100 spent in the world on tourism, only $5 goes back to developing local economies. And leakage in the Caribbean, according to the UN, is 50%. It further estimates that all-inclusives or all-inclusive packages result in an 80% leakage. Crudes, of course, adds another level of complexity to this issue. This creates a really compelling case for increasing local ownership in the sector. We've already mentioned the role tourism plays in employment, but governments also use tourism as a proven means to move people out of poverty. There can be no denial that much of our standard of living here in Barbados has been driven and is due to the positive contributions of tourism. Indeed, our analysis of local ownership among BHTA membership outside of the luxury class is generally quite encouraging. 53% of A-class hotels are owned by locals, and that number rises to 75% among the B-class and apartments. While we don't have definitive figures among our direct tourism services, several of our restaurants and attractions, and I make apologies at this stage for Cheryl Newman and for Nicolas Alleyne, who were due to join us but had unforeseen circumstances that mitigated against them being here. But as I was saying, several of our restaurants and attractions are locally owned and operated. Coming out of the COVID pandemic, tourism has been one of the most vilified industries in Barbados. The sector, it seems, that many Barbadians love to hate. While Bajans generally recognize the tremendous benefits that tourism has brought to this island, many have expressed their anger over the view that tourists brought COVID here. There have been repeated calls, even in the post 2020 period, for us to lock down this country and to stop tourists from coming. And there have been also calls to diversify immediately away from this critical industry. These are fueled a lot by the perception that tourism takes more from us than it gives. And a lot of people believe it's not really a benefit to locals, as locals operate mainly in entry-level jobs in white and foreign-owned businesses. And those white and foreign-owned businesses continue to reap the benefits of our hard work. Some have even gone so far as to label tourism as modern-day colonialism. As the sector tries to reemerge from this prolonged period of hardship, it therefore faces an almost existential crisis. How does it build back better, more sustainably, with more inclusion and greater access to owning a piece of the pie for the ordinary Barbadian? This is what our esteemed panel is here today to discuss. So again, apologies for Cheryl Newman, the owner and founder of Champers. She's not able to be here with us today. And apologies for Nicolas, Alleyne, who is a DMC owner who's also unable to attend. But I'm excited to welcome in Cheryl's place Mahmoud Patel, who in addition to being an entrepreneur and owner is also chairman of the Small Hotels of Barbados, which is a group of 43 properties. And in fact, some of my most exciting stats for this project, for this topic, came out of that grouping, where 22 of those 43 properties are Black owned, 65% are Black or minority ethnic owned, and over 50% are woman owned or led. So in addition to Mahmoud, we have a varied and experienced group of industry practitioners who are here to help us address this topic in our second BHTA webinar, Local Ownership in Tourism. Is it achievable? So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, online, and I'm going to ask him to speak first. He's actually out of Ireland, but has graciously conceded to be here with us, Gordon Seal. I want to say personally that Gordon is one of the hoteliers I admire greatly, if for nothing more than the fact that he's built 2 world-class products here in the island, and he's one of the most tenacious human beings I've ever met. Gordon is a Bajan. He is 73 years old and a former Harazonian, a trait seems to be shared by many of my panelists today. He graduated from the University of Guelph with a Bachelor's of Commerce in Hotel and Food Administration, and he worked overseas at Carleton University in Ottawa as a business manager, as well as for the Holiday Inns in Canada. On returning to Barbados, he opened a restaurant, the Banana Boat, and then in 1986, he purchased Sand Acres Hotel, and over several years has built the Bougainvillea Beach Resort with a UK partner, which he did with a UK partner. He later bought the bankrupt Amaryllis Hotel, which we're here now in the fantastic Sugar Bay, and has turned it into a successful all-inclusive. Gordon and his hotels have won a number of awards both locally and overseas, and he also served as the BHA, Barbados Hotel Association president from 1990 to 1991. This was a precursor to our BHTA. A family man, Gordon depends on his wife, Maria Nancy, and his 2 sons, Morgan and Dominic, as his business advisors. Gordon, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. I'd like to hear you with your thoughts on our topic today about increasing local ownership in tourism. Is it achievable?
Thanks a lot for that introduction, Renee. I appreciate it. I'm having a little bit of a problem with my camera. I'm not sure why. I've just come off of your list. Can you still see me? Right. Okay. Hang on. There we go. Everything good? You can hear me? Hello? Hello?
Then we can hear you. We can hear you, Gordon.
Okay. Thank you very much for being on this panel. I appreciate it. And I'll share my opinions. This is for the increasing local ownership. One of the things over the years that has never failed to amaze me that tourism does not get. The camera's moving away. Sorry. One of the things that has amazed me over the years is that the tourism industry does not get the credit that it's due, particularly on home in Barbados. I mean, I think overseas people think that Barbados is a wonderful product, and that the hotels and the tourism product is very, very good, and that's shown by the fact that we have the numbers that we do have. Looking at the ownership situation, as you said, the West Coast, the large West Coast hotels are almost exclusively owned overseas. This is not surprising because our big local companies that could afford to invest in the hotel industry just haven't done so. I think of Sagicor, I think of Goddard's Enterprises, although Massey is Trinidad company, it's still a regional company. None of these people have invested in the hotel industry. And there is a reasonably good reason for that.
The hotel industry in particular, that's my expertise, is a very demanding total dedication business, particularly for people getting started in the business. As you would know, Renée, this is a total dedication. You have to be, it's not a 40-hour week. It's actually takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. Probably more when you're getting started, more like 2 hours a week if you're lucky. And that includes working on weekends, etc. But tourism does provide a decent foreign exchange that we earn in Barbados. And since we have to import just about everything, it means that most people in Barbados are dependent on tourism. For example, even if you're producing chickens, you have to buy feed for abroad, and you need US dollars to do it. That also applies to raw materials and construction of houses and buildings. You need US dollars, which comes from the tourism business to do that. Unfortunately, one of the things is that we have very high taxation in Barbados. I'm quite sure that most people don't realize the extent of the taxation that we pay in the hotel business. But that is a result of having a large percentage of the working population in the civil service. We accept that is something that we have to live with, and if we can make the contributions there, then that's great. The rapid expansion of solar energy that is occurring at the present moment should yield some jobs, and more importantly, lower the need to fossil fuels. The problem is that these people talk about alternatives. I don't know what the alternatives are, because our unique selling points or advantages almost lie 100% in the tourism industry. We have friendly people, we have nice beaches, we have excellent historical architecture, which unfortunately is not being preserved as it should be, because that is something that we have that is different and sets us apart from many of the other sea and sand destinations that we have to compete against. A lot of people don't realize that 25% of the hotel rates that you see posted actually have to go to pay the tour operators and the online travel agents abroad. It's a huge chunk of money. It means that they're making considerably more money off our product than we are. So I'm speaking of hotels. The hotels are paying a lot of money to bring people to Barbados. And of course, all of the tourism, the other tourism services benefit from that money. In the case of our hotels, 75% of our room nights are being sold, paying 25% to tour operators. Obviously, you have a lot of other expenses, but in terms of getting into the business, I think that the approach can be that can, if you're a small person, you can either go into front side of the business, which doesn't take so much capital to get in. Or you can also look at starting an Airbnb, where you can rent a small property at a sensible price, fix it up so it appeals to overseas visitors, and rent out the rooms, and then you can expand from there. I think though that everyone that is going to go into the hotel business needs to be exposed to the different departments by working for someone else for a few years. I would suggest that young Barbadians who want to get involved in ownership of the business, should look at doing 2 to 3 years, or 3 to 4 years, working in different departments of different hotels, so that they can actually use that experience to avoid making major mistakes when they go to set up. Everything will depend on your aptitude, and you can work your way up and decide the right moment on your own. It is a business that takes a lot of time and effort, as I said earlier. I would argue that virtually everyone in Barbados gets paid directly or indirectly from tourism. All of the government employees, consultants, professionals like doctors and lawyers do depend on that money coming in from tourism. And the problem that we have with encouraging a lot of Barbadians into the business is that when you speak to the graduating classes, they're all looking at going into law, medicine, or engineering, which is seen as the pinnacle of academic achievement. So our brightest kids, our brightest students are not going into tourism. We should try to develop an excellent chef school in Barbados. This is a well-paid graduate working here and get jobs. And I would finish by saying that we need to treasure our old architecture. There seems to be some people who would like to see all of these old buildings destroyed for whatever reasons. But it is actually something that is our unique selling point. And we need to give a lot more support than we have been given to preserving the old buildings, to preserving, for example, Roebuck Street is a good example of some of the architecture which tourists will pay money to come to Barbados to go and to see that. I think at this point you touched on the ownership situation with with the hotels, and I think at this point I will leave it now for questions. But suffice it to say that there are also the villas, which I'm told by Andrew Malalu that they have more rooms in the villas than they have in the hotels. I'm not sure that is 100% correct, but I have to go by what I'm being told. And in that case, we need to think about the villas as well in the tourism product. And also we need to look at the employment, the wider employment in taxi cars, car rentals, Atlantis submarines, cruising cats, caves of Barbados, scuba operators, island tour operators, ground handlers, airport workers, chair rentals, restaurants, pottery, golf clubs, horse racing, everything that basically benefits from tourism. So with that, Renée, I will sign off for the moment and just say that there are also untold numbers of Bajans working in good positions all over the world in tourism who got their start in Barbados. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gordon. We are having some technical issues. The online audience is getting some feedback. I'm not sure if you're using two devices, but if you could see if you could help us with that, just check on your end for us for our next set of question and answers. But thanks very much.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I can, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
You did hear what I said.
We did. Oh, I heard you clearly. I heard you very clearly. Thank you. I'm going to go quickly to introducing Josea Browne. And Josea Browne, again, I have to put a little personal peg. Josea Browne is one of the smartest women I know in tourism or otherwise. I'm going to tell you that when I was starting my business, I had been in tourism for a while, and Josea is the one who introduced me to revenue management and showed me that ignorance is not stupidity. She's a hospitality and tourism consultant, and over the last 20 years, she's invested her time in the industry learning all facets of industry operations, logistics, and developing a critical mind for business development. She has worked for 4 different Fortune 500 hospitality companies, both locally and abroad, and these experiences have expanded her view of how Indigenous Caribbean tourism fits into a broader global framework. As a trained revenue manager, she has worked closely with local hotels, and I know there's some GMs out there who would agree with me. We quiver in fear when we had sessions with Josea, and we call each other to check we've done our homework. But she's worked closely with the hotels and associations to provide training and develop best practices, as well as expanding the footprint of a major online travel agency through the islands from Trinidad and Tobago to Antigua and Barbuda by working one-on-one with local operators to achieve mutual financial success. 2 of Josea's favorite things are crop over, she's suffering right now, and cricket, especially CPL. Josea holds a Bachelor of Commerce in Hospitality and Tourism Management with a minor in marketing from Ryerson University. Josea, welcome. I'm excited to hear your inputs and your thoughts on our topic today.
Thank you so very much, Renée. Ooh, thank you so very much. Okay, so whenever I am asked, what do you do or where do you work, I generally respond with, I work in tourism. Now, 99% of the time, there are two follow-up questions to that. The first one is, which hotel do you work at? And the second one is, so do you work at the front desk or do you work in the restaurant? Now, we all know that tourism and the tourist experience definitely spans way beyond those two things. I could work at a tour or an attraction. I could be a taxi driver. I could work in accounts. I mean, after all, somebody has to count the money. I could work in IT. Internet is like water for everybody. I could work in sales and marketing, events planning, property management, in the laundry, in the kids club, pretty much anywhere. But the reality is that I have never been presented with any of those other options as the possibility of what my job in this industry could be. But why does this matter, you know? Why is this important to us? My answer is very simple. In order for us to successfully achieve more local ownership in tourism, we must first normalize speaking about tourism opportunities and possibilities in much broader terms. It's not just about the direct tourism products that we know so well, you know, your hotels, your restaurants, etc., but it's also about the indirect and the ancillary services and products, as well as the synergies that exist across complementary industries. We're talking about agriculture, education, arts and culture, commerce, technology and innovation, health, finance. Let me expand on that just a little bit. When we think about new tourism product development, we look within the industry, we see what the void is, we look and we see what can be added, and pretty much that is what we build. I want to challenge us to look within our society as a whole instead, see what is missing there, see what the needs are, what needs enhancing, and then we build that. Once we build it for us as a people and as a society, then we automatically strengthen our overall tourism product and value proposition as a destination. In that scenario, everybody wins. I want us to take a look at three things that pretty much changed over the last 18 months or so. Food options and delivery services, public transportation, and farming and home gardening. Now, these are not specifically tourism products, but imagine that you are a guest booking Barbados. Look at how many more culinary options are now available to you since the pandemic started. Look at how overall convenience has improved since the pandemic started. We know Barbados is hot, and it tends to be a little hotter for the people who visit us and are not accustomed to the heat. Do you know how big an advantage air-conditioned buses actually is for tourism? I mean, it allows the guests to budget differently, to be able to try new things, to be able to take money saved by using public transportation and putting it into another product that is here locally. Another example is, what is better than arriving at your vacation rental and having access to garden fresh fruit and veg and herbs? Can we really now say that all those things that we succeeded in producing during the pandemic are not directly tourism products? What we actually need is to provide programs to guide the rest of our population on how to maximize the potential of the industry. Going a step further, ownership of our industry, in my opinion, isn't just referring to physical products. We must own every step of the back-of-house process, to distribution, to the delivery of the visitor experience. When we truly diversify the public local messaging of our industry in such a way that it enhances its perception and successfully encourages mass participation, then we create an environment for entrepreneurship and creativity to thrive. Yes, accommodation and dining are core foundational elements of the industry, but they do not a complete experience make. And if we're being honest, in their traditional form, accommodation, here referring to hotels, and dining, referring specifically to restaurants, they do present huge financial barriers that the majority of our population is not able to overcome. So our expanded ownership must start where the barriers to entry are actually easier to hurdle. Now, speaking of the difficulty involved with owning the big things like hotels or restaurants, I'd like to take an opportunity to throw something into the universe, and hopefully it can happen. Now, this is a personal wish of mine. From Speightstown to Spring Garden to Long Bay, there are major tourism development projects that individual Bajans could never dream of being a part of. But the truth is that we're always looking outside for foreign investment. Rather than looking outside for foreign investment, maybe we take a step back and look in our own backyard. Because personally, I would like the chance to put some money into a specific tourism project along with some other individual Bajans where we can almost be our own venture capitalists and fund tourism products. This is not just for locals, for Bajans who live here, but we can expand this to the diaspora, all the Bajans overseas. I mean, the finance minds and the brilliant people that we have here can figure out exactly what kind of mechanism we need to do this thing. But we live in an era where crowdfunding exists. Couldn't we have an option to do the same so that we as individual Bajans can honestly own a piece of the rock and help everybody along the path of generational wealth and growing everything? That's where I see ownership in our industry going. It's beyond the traditional brick and mortar. It's about owning everything, telling our story the way that we know how to. Thanks, Renee.
Thank you, Josea. I think that is a nice segue to our next speaker because, again, someone who is very passionate about tourism, about agriculture, about the creative arts, and who brings a lot to the table. I asked him for a bio, and he sent me a bio that is more about coconuts than it is about him. But I'm going to read what he sent to me. Mahmoud Patel is a hotelier, agriculturalist, and an artist, and he's also chairman of the Intimate Hotels of Barbados. He's currently the owner of Cocoa Hill Forest in St. Joseph. Cocoa Hill is a 53-acre regenerative agricultural project with one of its main focus on planting coconut trees and creating a coconut nursery. Mahmoud is interested in all parts of the coconut tree, as it is the tree of life. He believes that coconut can be a viable crop to mitigate the damage from sugarcane monocrop, as it's a tree that can be used in agroforestry intercrop settings. The byproducts from the waste and products such as oil, milk, sugar, cosmetics, and medicinals, etc., can be a platform for cooperative types of business modeling. As a hotelier, he's attempting to marry tourism and agriculture to help address food security and resilience. So having had this presentation now from Gordon and Josea, I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Mahmoud, on this topic.
All right, welcome, and Renée, thanks for the opportunity to have a platform to look at achieving local ownership in tourism. Is it achievable, and how can we make that happen? I think post-COVID, we need to try and make that happen. The challenges that I see are the impression in Barbados is who benefits from tourism. There's this impression that it is mostly foreign direct investment, white-owned kind of ownership. And I would say that what we need to do is to move away to make tourism more community-driven, more local-owned. How can we make tourism a means to an end rather than an end in itself? I think that's another challenge, that tourism is seen as a monocrop. But inside tourism itself, there's the idea of agro-tourism, eco-tourism, historical tourism that Gordon spoke about. And maybe we need to start to change the narrative on what tourism is. And tourism could be a means to pull the other sectors like agriculture, pull creative industries, pull the energy sector into more local ownership. I think one of the challenges that we have from being a post-colonial society is that we come out of 300-400 years of monocrop. We had one industry, sugarcane, and then we would export that and import everything else. So maybe on an educational level, we need to deconstruct this idea that we still operate in a monocrop kind of environment. And we never really owned our own businesses, our own identity, our own narrative. Maybe from an educational system, we need to look to address that as well. All right, so just some ideas of how we can go about deconstructing monocrop and make tourism more local and more inclusive is, I think, mirroring what Josea was saying, is that it can't only be about the mortar and brick. It can't only be about, tourism is not only the accommodation sector. And I would like to posit that we move tourism in Barbados from only seeing it as hotels and accommodation, but more as experiential. So tourism is an experience and not, so you come to Barbados and you have the 1,000 things you can do and you stay in a room. And that would create a framework of opportunities to start looking at agro-tourism, eco-tourism, surfing, kite surfing, potteries, art, food, history, architecture, museums, and so on. And I think if you change the narrative, that is an experience that you come here, it means that it becomes a lot more inclusive. And just some really practical ideas. How you develop a country is by roads and cities. And Barbados have always been centric in that Bridgetown is the main area. Our road system is a radial system. Everything leads to Bridgetown. But there's no road network in the country. We have developed Warrens as a kind of entrepreneurial hub. I would like to suggest that we start to look at rural hubs, rural nodes that you start to create, make it very easy. For instance, a guest who is staying at the Crane Hotel could get to St. Joseph. You have to go to Bridgetown and then get another bus to go to the middle of the island or Bhca or so on. That is under development. And we need to break down this idea of how we create road networks, nodal networks. If we create green routes in the middle of the island, let's say you use Harrison's Cave as a central point, and then there is a bus green route going circling in some kind of defined area, you could create all kinds of micro businesses along this route that would be community driven. Like some of the guys on block areas could set up food cafes or art or whatever. And this is a soft way to quickly deconstruct or redefine what inclusive tourism is. I would also like to say that the big challenge, and this is my own personal experience, and as chairman of the small hotels in Barbados, and that funding and investment opportunities is a challenge. And one of the ways to look at that is also, again, deconstruct or liberalize our banking institution in the Caribbean. We need to go get there. And maybe cooperative type of structures, credit union type of structures, or even sovereign fund kind of investment structures are mechanisms that we have to look at. Because we can talk about all the possibilities about doing all of these brilliant ideas and projects, but on the other side of that equation is funding. And our funding has not been democratic. It has not been liberalized to be inclusive. And I mean, that's a post-colonial syndrome or illness that we suffer from. But I would like to say that we would also need to look at the other side of development, which is you need the funding to make that happen. I think that we'd also need to look at, don't make tourism the end of itself, but make tourism a platform to create sustainable and resilient sectors. So pull agriculture, pull creative industries, pull food, furniture industry, and so on. And if that can happen, I think we could start to create a more achievable tourism sector in Barbados.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renée.
I like your last comments regarding financing, and I actually want to use them to launch into our next panelist, who is an investment analyst, Rohan Cumberbatch at Enterprise Growth Fund Limited. I think all of us are quite familiar with EGFL, and particularly with Rohan, because he is the person who tends to be our financial consultant as a small hoteliers, and he's the one who's worked a lot with developing micro-business in the sector. He's been employed by EGFL for 14 years, and over those years, he's accumulated vast experience in the financial services sector, primarily in the small and medium-sized enterprise sector. As well, he has gained tremendous experience in the tourism sector as it relates to financing the refurbishment and construction of properties in the accommodation sector. Rohan earned his Bachelor of Science degree in accounting from the University of the West Indies, and he has a Master of Business Administration in Strategic Accounting and Finance from Brunel University in London. In addition to his work at EGFL, he's an educator, and he has been since 1991. He began his teaching career at the Alleyne School and has also been a part-time tutor in accounting at the BCC for the past 20 years. So Rohan, welcome. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on financing in the sector and how do we make local ownership more achievable?
Hi, good morning to everybody. You hear me well, Renée?
I'm hearing you somewhat, but your levels are a little bit low. There's always a challenge with managing a live panel and online panel. So
Right, how's that?
that is much better. Thank you.
Okay. First, I would like to thank you, Renée, and the Barbados Tourism Association, for inviting me to share my views on this topic. Increasing local ownership in tourism, is it achievable? Now, I would like to start by saying, in my estimation, when we are considering increasing local ownership, we are speaking to having a wider percentage of persons owning tourism products, tourism assets. We are not just looking at those who already own tourism assets and giving them or allowing them the opportunity to own more. We are looking to having a wider ownership base, so to speak. So in my estimation, to increase local ownership in tourism, there must be a paradigm shift in the belief system of most of our people. Yes, I can come here and I can pronounce on the various forms of raising capital. We can look at debt or equity financing, and we can complain about the difficulties experienced by individuals or companies who would like to invest in the tourism industry. These complaints are normally about people's or businesses' inability to raise capital. Now, my perspective is we can just revisit our past. Large segments of our population have been taught not to invest. We have been taught to get an education and get a job. Although there are many examples around the world of people who made millions without a degree, in some cases without a high school diploma. But this concept of how we are expected to behave is implanted in our psyche, to the point where most of our people can be categorized as being risk averse. We are afraid to take risks. It's just part of our DNA. I remember as a young man working as a teller in the then Barclays Bank in Spicestown and collecting thousands of dollars in deposits from oldsters, quote unquote oldsters, rolled up in bundles, tied up with cotton, and full of dust. And this was the extent of their investment, money saved in a bank account after being accumulated under a bed or in some other storage area for a significant period of time. Yes, some bought or leased a plot of land for crop or livestock production. But what they did do beyond this, some may argue that they may have used their profits to educate their children. But have we moved on from this point? Or do we still have the same mindset? Is the current generation still working only to educate its children so that they too can find a job to continue the cycle? How many have decided to invest in a simple bed and breakfast facility? How many have invested in a guest house? How many are part of the Airbnb setup? Not many, because we like to play it safe. While others, some are not, some of whom are not from within our own society, use those same very deposits that we make in the banks at the credit union, and they undertake investments with that money. So we end up with a return of 0.1% on our investment. And those persons and businesses who take our funds, as I said, some from international jurisdictions or regional jurisdictions take our funds. invest our funds and make significantly higher returns on the investments. But what can we do? We need leadership in this area. We need those who have been successful to tell their stories. We have social media that can propel information across our landscape and beyond at frightening speeds. Let us use this to our advantage instead of simply broadcasting junk that has no real or tangible value to our lives. I know a gentleman years ago purchased a large plot of land. He subsequently divided his land into two parcels. He sold one of the parcels and used those proceeds to help construct two townhouses on the remaining land. Today he owns 4 townhouses. I think sometimes we want to hold these success stories too close to our chests, to the detriment of our society as a whole and to our economy. To encourage and enhance local ownership, we need charismatic leaders who are willing to champion this cause. We need flamboyant marketers who can put an appealing concept to potential investors. Exciting developers who can develop an attractive project that is so financially appealing that when investors examine it, they yearn to become a part of it. They are sold on it. I think crowdfunding is an exciting option. Forms of lease arrangements with absentee property owners is another good option. Some hotels could be persuaded to offer employees share ownership plans to help enfranchise their workers. As a means of raising capital and expanding ownership, can we have hotels listed on a stock exchange? That's something that we can investigate a little bit more. And I agree with some industry players who insist that to encourage greater local ownership, we all have to consider the following, and especially the movers and the shakers in the industry. We have to look at incentive to local owners, which also includes small property owners. We have to look to improve the rates for capital investments, such as solar and other green investments, although the truth is that those rates aren't that bad at this point in time. We have to look to provide better rates for property and liability insurances. These are things that small owners are complaining about. If more players are encouraged or are to be encouraged, affordable insurance coverage is a must. Players in the industry are also asking for financial assistance in staff training through the introduction of what we're doing here, seminars, webinars, workshops put on by entities that are associated with tourism, such as the Barbados Tourism Product Authority and so on. Conclusively, the introduction of Airbnb and other types of facilities in this accommodation sector and market has given us an example of how local ownership can begin to expand. It has also indicated to us that not all visitors to our shores come to experience the food and culture they left back home, but are very interested in embracing the local food and culture. A significant percentage of them want to experience local people, experiment with local dishes, and patronize village bars, rum shops, albeit in a safe and relaxing environment. To my mind, there are significant opportunities for the average person to get involved. But the question is, who is going to take the lead? How are we going to break those mental shackles that suggest to most of us that we are to be workers and not owners? I thank you.
I thank you, Rohan. That actually was not what I expected. So I'm having these mind-blown experiences right now with all of these presenters. I have a question, and it's a burning one. It's not in Slido. It's one that someone asked me from before, and it's directed to Mr. Seal. Is Gordon still online? Yes, great. Gordon, one of the questions I was asked was, and this is based on the perception that hotels and large entities in tourism are white and foreign owned. How much of an advantage do you think that has been in determining your success as a hotelier? And this question was directed towards hotel ownership, but obviously you are the premier hotel owner on our panel. So I want to ask you, how much of an advantage do you think being white, being a Barbadian white, has given you in terms of building your businesses?
Okay, well, just so that everybody knows, because people tend to think you get money left to you, or somebody gives you that assistance. I actually went to Canada when I was 20, after working in Barbados at the airport for Pan American. And from that time until I got my degree in hotel industry, in my Bachelor of Commerce in Hotel Business at the University of Guelph, and later returned to Barbados, I paid for every single thing out of my own pocket. Every book, every meal, all accommodation, all fees, everything else. I say that because I think that people need to understand that you don't have to be given a silver spoon to be able to succeed in the business. I think having worked in Canada, I then worked in Canada with Holidays for about 2 years. And I think that my exposure to Canada and Canadians helped me in terms of understanding what foreigners might consider to be good or bad versus what we ourselves in Barbados might see as what, in other words, knowing how to please them was very important. I think that being white or black is not the key, is not actually the advantage. I think maybe what Rohan was saying is true, that maybe too many people see themselves as workers. They like the security of a paycheck at the end of every month or every week. And so I think that is a part of the problem. Another part of the problem, I think, is that it has always been my opinion that Barbados has an anti-business bias. I said it many, many years ago, and it hasn't changed. There's an awful lot of people who project that you only succeed in business if you know how to carry away money from people. It's absolute rubbish, of course. And I think that we could do a much better job in our schools of teaching our kids that in our system, business is a very essential part of our survival as a nation. I can't emphasize more that everybody in Barbados, and particularly the very, very large civil service, gets paid from us, from the tourism earnings. That's how everybody's getting paid. So we need to find a way to be able to educate young Barbadians about business, and not your sort of academic approach, but your practical approach. I agree completely. Rohan said that you don't need to have I think it was Renée, I said you don't need to have a degree to be successful in business. I would go beyond that. I would say that basically those of us I could never have been a lawyer. I couldn't sit down and look at bits of paper all day long, or an accountant just sitting behind a desk. I couldn't do it. It would drive me nuts. I think that's why I wasn't a terribly good school. I wasn't that academically wonderful, because basically I just couldn't take it. I couldn't take sitting down behind a desk all the time. And I think that those people who have not done well at school or have not achieved the pinnacle of success as a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, that basically those people are the ones that are all doing best in business everywhere, not just in Barbados. I see it with people in Canada and people in other parts of the world as well. So business is an alternative. If I could just touch on what Rohan said about the getting money together, finance together in Barbados, I would be very happy to be part of anything like that. I would love to see Bajans having more opportunity to invest money than simply having it in a bank. And it worries me that Bajans who had all their shares in banks, breweries, and they had shares in a lot in Massey and whatever it was at the time, shipping and trading or whatever. There were a lot of Bajan and the Electric Barbados Light and Power Company. A lot of those people have sold those shares, which means that those shares have gone abroad, which means that all of the benefits, the dividends from most of those businesses, rather than coming back into Barbados now, is now going abroad, which is not good for the island either. So Rohan, I'd be very happy to talk at any time in the future about how we could get together as to put something together so that there could be investment opportunities for Barbadians.
I'm going to throw this discussion based on what you said out to the entire panel, because we hear a lot about financing and we talk a lot about financing, opportunities for financing. Josea and Rohan both touched on crowdfunding. You touched on increasing sovereign funding and trying to create mechanisms by which people can access funding. I know as a business person how challenging that aspect can be. How do we improve opportunities, Rohan, Gordon, Josea, realistically? I have a business idea. I want to go out there and get started. How do we realistically now get that process going? Feel free to jump in, anyone. Rohan? I want to touch on a personal concern I have with that, in that the Small Hotels Investment Fund has been a tremendous source of help, assistance to the small hotel sector, which we touched on earlier as being one of the most indigenous sectors. Our B-class hotels in the BHTA is owned 75% local owned. The IHB is almost 100% local owned or regional owned. And so it is tremendously important that we incentivize people to become a part of the sector by giving them opportunities. We have been told that the Small Hotels Investment Fund will not be recapitalized, and those are the kinds of impediments that we feel we don't need at this time. So I'm throwing out to you right now, how do we get this process improved and how do we get it started?
Renee, crowdfunding was mentioned, I think, by two persons so far, or three. And I think that that is something that we have to investigate a little bit more. Um, when I look at international news and so on, we often hear about this GoFundMe kind of platform where people look for opportunities to raise small amounts from a large volume of people um, for some purpose or the other, right? And we would have seen it in the political arena, and I'm thinking that it is something that we can look at realistically in Barbados as well. And that in itself will give more people in Barbados the opportunity to own um, or have some kind of ownership in a lot of the properties in Barbados. And they don't have to be existing properties either. We can look at, as I mentioned in my presentation, we can have a situation where there's some dynamic developer who puts a project on the table, and when it's presented to potential investors, it is so financially appealing. And that's why I'm saying we need dynamic leaders. We need leadership in this area. We need people. Not everybody has the gift of gab. Not everybody can inspire. Not everybody can lead. But we need persons who can do these things, who can put um, projects with strong fundamentals on the table, projects that are appealing to investors, and then we can have persons on the other end looking at financing opportunities. There are many. We have the peer-to-peer lending, we have the crowdfunding. I like the idea of crowdfunding because when we talk about increasing local ownership, we are speaking to as I understand it, widening the base of the ownership rather than having the same people own more. So to widen the base, to me, something like crowdfunding speaks to that pretty closely, and that is something that I think that we should look a little more at, and try to investigate a little more about, because I am sure in Barbados there are people who are very familiar with the concept and who may be able to put it into action, right? So together with persons who have ideas about properties and property development and so on, whether they are new properties or existing properties, and how do we then finance the refurbishment or the rebuilding of these properties by allowing more people to own through an apparatus such as crowdfunding.
So I want to ask Mahmoud, because he has a very specific experience. He both is an hotelier as well as he has Cocoa Hill, which is an ecotourism, agricultural tourism project. How difficult is it to bring something like that online and to get funding for something like that?
I would say, I will come back to your question by a two-part way. There's about $8 billion of savings in the Barbados economy. So we have funding available. The problem is, what I would like to say from an intellectual basis, there's purposeful underdevelopment that happens in the Caribbean. That money is not available to us as business people because of our existing banking structures and our financial institutions. That needs to be deconstructed. If we're going to talk about inclusivity and local buy-in to our development, we need to change the banking system. I would say flat out. My own personal experience as a business person, I would say, first of all, I don't think it has anything to do with being black, white, or Indian. I think it's about attitude, it's about education, it's about culture. I remember my old man, my father, literally beating me when I was going to get a job as an accountant, telling me, don't ever work for anybody. In the Islamic religion, you have to be self-employed. God gives more wealth and barakat, means blessing, to people who do their own trade. The thing is trade, the exchange of goods and services. That is what life is about. As humans, when we moved out of being a hunter-gatherer, we exchange goods and services. And I think that's something to include in our culture and our upbringing, this idea of exchanging goods and services. It has a lot of respect, it has a lot of pride, and you know, don't see it as being like taking money. It's about exchanging. All right, my own personal experience, especially going into agroforestry and agrotourism, was fairly painful. It took me, I've always wanted to plant coconut trees, even more than hotel. And it took me from 26 years old to nearly 60 to be able to do that, because no banking institution in this country believed in the idea of agrotourism. So I had to personally save money and had help from the owners of the property who believed in the project to do that. So I would say fundamental problem we have here is our banking system. It needs deconstructing. And Rohan talked about leadership. That's where we need a call out to leadership. Otherwise, we will spin in the mud and we will talk and talk, but it will not be a monumental shift. We can do crowdfunding, that's small. We can try to do cooperatives. I mean, that's a longer, painful way. But fundamentally, to make a transformational shift, our banking system needs to change.
I want to make a statement, please.
Please do.
So we've heard that, you know, we need to make these fantastic presentations to the financiers. We've heard that, you know, we've got to step out and we've got to do all these things. And I've worked with several of my clients who have developed fantastic concepts, who've done the magic of the marketing to bring these things to fruition and have taken it to financiers. You can write a document with the perfect business plan. You can sell this to the hilt. Everybody will love it. But there's always a question that is asked. Who owns it? And from the time that question is asked, who owns it? If that name is not the right name sitting behind that project, you have reached a hurdle in your financing. So I really want us to take a step back and ask, is it our issue when we're presenting fantastic projects? Or do we need to open up the minds of the people who are supposed to be investing, the organizations that the funding is laid out within to support these projects for not moving forward with them? Because this is a small society. And whether we like it or not, the reality is that you think somebody has something, so you don't want to give them something more. You think that, oh, this person has done this before, so you know what? We like them, so we'll give it to them. This is some serious favoritism in financing and approval of funds that happens to the detriment of fantastic projects that sit on this island. So we have to, I'm not sure if it's regulate, but we have to make sure that we either send in these proposals with numbers and no names so that there's fairness across the board, because that is a reality of our situation. I'd also like to go back to this idea of ownership, and people like to talk about entrepreneurship. And it is a thing that we start to shame people who don't have that particular gene within themselves to step out. You can be an owner in terms of the crowdsourcing and the crowdfunding without being an entrepreneur. If you asked me, I know a lot of things, I've done a lot of studies, I've studied everything. But if you asked me 20 years ago if I was ever going to be an entrepreneur, my answer was hell no. It's never going to be me because, one, I don't have the patience for it. I can't do mundane tasks every single day. So I'm not going to be the person to sit down and run this particular business every single day doing the same things. There are people who thrive at being the people who do the work, who go in and they do that. So when we're having these conversations, I really would like us to understand that there's people who will be owners and will be investors, but they don't have to be the entrepreneurs within that particular scenario. It pulls people back from wanting to be a part of a conversation because you're saying the only way to be a part of it is that you have to build the product, you have to be the one behind there doing all the work, and that's not right. That's all.
It can never be all Josea. It's an interesting discussion. And I, having had personal experience dealing with banking at all different levels, understand the challenges you speak of when you talk about, how personal banking can be in a small society. So there are real challenges. And that's why I spoke to Gordon about the issue of race and the issue of access sometimes, which is based on who you are, who you know, what you are perceived to have, as opposed to the quality of the idea, the leadership, and the knowledge that you bring to a situation. So really, it is important for us to have these discussions around how do we break that down if we want to create a wider base of access. And I actually would like, Rohan, if you could touch on some of the funds available that you have available, the tools you have, because I have some questions from our young leaders about what kinds of opportunities there are for financing in the sector. Rohan, is Rohan still there?
Yeah.
So I'm interested. I have a list of, I did some research on the number of agencies that work with small businesses to help them get set up. But I also want to hear about Enterprise Growth Fund, because I know you do a lot of funding to help businesses get going. Not hearing you, Rohan.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Right. We have two funds that are dedicated to tourism, which would be the Small Hotel Investment Fund, what we call the SHIF, and the Tourism Loan Fund, right? Those are dedicated products, and over the years, we have
Rohan, I'm sorry, we're getting some buffering.
helped a
with
tremendous amount of people. I'm basically
Sorry, I'm getting some. So you broke up after Small Hotel Investment Fund. I think you said Tourism Loan Fund after that, but I think we lost a lot of what you said.
Yeah, so I was just saying that these two funds together have been used to assist tremendously in the area of tourism. Um, the thing about tourism, in my estimation, is that because of the nature of the business, there is a need for consistent funding, right? What we have is a situation where an entity may approach us for a loan, and the loan could be 7 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever the case may be in duration. But you have to realize that before that loan is matured, then there's a need for further financing, because oftentimes you have to do some more refurbishment, you have to change out some furniture, and so forth. So there's a need for constant funding in the tourism industry, and that is something that we all have to look at and see how best it is to fund tourism products, because it is not as easy as it seems. Um, if you take a normal mortgage on a home, that is 20 years or so, you would appreciate that within that 20-year span, before you can liquidate that mortgage, that you would have to do some repainting, some people do some expansion and so on. It means going back to the lending institution to get some more funding. And what that does, that puts debt on top of debt, right? And what happens on a personal level is that if you have increased your income, or you have another revenue stream to consider, that may work out pretty well. But what if you're a hotel with fixed amount of rooms? Let's say you have 50 rooms, and your first loan was based on the fact that you have 50 rooms and this is the income you can generate from having 50 rooms. But you now have to go back for additional funding, not for expansion purposes, but for refurbishment, for sprucing up, as we would say, for changing out maybe furniture and fixing bathrooms and all those things, replacing fittings and so on. Those things cost money. So what's happened now, you still have your 50 rooms. You may be able to charge a little bit more because of the upgrade, but is the additional revenue that is coming in sufficient to cover the increase in loan payment? So these are all things that we have to grapple with, right? Now, one of we talk about funding through banks and developmental banks like Enterprise Growth Fund and so on. But one of the problems with funding, loan funding, and that's essentially what it is loan funding, is that you have to consider the interest burden, right? Um, and oftentimes you're told, listen, if you're going to start a business, as far as possible, see how you can get equity funding, how you can reach out to family and friends and so on, right? And speaking generally, no, and not necessarily for hotel, but hotel falls into a type of business as well. But in other words, minimize. I'm not saying that it's always possible to forego loan funding. What I'm saying is try to minimize the loan funding, because once you get that loan, there is that interest burden, there's that repayment that you have to consider. In the case of equity funding, then you don't have that as an initial problem. And if you have investors, you can, or shareholders, what they can say, listen, we are not doing very well yet. Let's give the hotel some time to consolidate its financial position, and then we can consider paying some dividends. But at this point in time, let's give it some breathing space, so you can have a 5-year period where there are no dividends being paid, right? Now, if you go to a lending institution, bank, etc., then you're gonna have that issue. So we have the small hotel investment fund, where that was a particular situation that we put in place, where for the first 5 years, there was no need for the principal repayment, right? What we encourage
Rohan, you're breaking up again. I'm so sorry.
to do is to pay the interest portion of um, at the end of year 5.
Rohan, I'm very familiar with the Small Hotels Investment Fund, and I know personally that option, that moratorium, was a trap, and a lot of hotels fell into it, where they then had compounding interest and ended up with these balloon payments that they then could not afford. So I think financial advice is very critical to ensuring that businesses make sound decisions when they're looking at financing. But I like Mahmoud's story about his dad beating him. I think if my mother had beaten me for that, I would have probably spent less time working for other people and gone into business on my own earlier. But I like the idea of building a culture of encouraging your children to go into business. And I'd like to, both you and Gordon, to give some idea as to how you were able to use equity financing, support from family, and other mechanisms, if they existed, to help you in your businesses.
All right, and my personal thing is that I had a job for about 3 years. I saved. I went into business with a friend, actually Russell Corey, went to Harrison College too. And we started Nature Care. And then over the years, Bill obviously worked really hard. You know, sometimes 80, as Gordon said, you become a slave to your business. That's a monster that you have to constantly feed. But that's a sacrifice that you also have to be aware, is that you have to have a good idea, a good project, but be willing to put the blood, sweat, and tears into this process, and that way you accumulate capital or funding. I can also say something too, and I call it what I call purity of intention. People are attracted to good ideas and to powerful thinking and to people who are entrepreneurial or creative. You know, that is a law of nature. And then once you stay true to your idea and to your project, you will find it. I can't explain it. It's not magic. I think it's just how we are as humans. People will come to you, or you will attract people that will help you. And I can say in my journey as a business person or as an entrepreneur, as a creative person, it is a mixture of one, total belief in yourself. Even if it's crazy, you have to believe in yourself totally. The second thing is the ability to take a project, see what it will look like at the end, and then break it down into 100 steps, and every day try and achieve one little step. And then over time, you will see that it starts to kind of coalesce or make itself. I would say a mixture of some family investment, personal investment, and then other entrepreneurs liking what you do and assist you either by lending you money or guaranteeing loans or helping you to, grow. I've found is a mixture. And I have to say that I had some mentoring help as well. And that's an interesting thing as well. When I bought Ocean Spray, it was the owner before who gave me part financing. And so to me, I would say is that your attitude, your spirit, your energy, believe in yourself, and it somehow opens itself. But you have to have that faith in yourself, that absolute faith in yourself. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this by whatever means necessary. People buy that energy.
Gordon, are you still online? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that question, if you're still there. I do have a question online that I'm going to answer while Gordon is joining us again. And the person has asked, is there any independent local organization for Airbnb owners to join? And that association does exist. It's actually a partner now. I believe we have a memorandum of understanding. And it's called Bhca, which is the Barbados Entrepreneurship and Tourism Association. And it's made up of a number of Airbnbs and other small sharing economy type accommodation. And I believe that they have actually more, we talked about the villa segment earlier, but I think they have more rooms now in this pool than we have in our hotel pool as well. So it's a growing and dynamic segment. Were you able to get Gordon on the line?
I'm here.
Hi, Gordon. So the question I'd asked, and I asked you, Mahmoud, to give your reflection on it, was how important was it to have other sources of funding, equity funding, and other types of partnership and relationships to help you when you were starting out?
Well, I didn't have other types of funding when I started out. Basically, what I did is when I came back from Canada, I was offered a job at a substantial hotel on the West Coast as one of the senior management people there, at a much better salary than I took. I decided to go and work for Sand Acres, which was a small hotel, 38 rooms, in bad condition. It was very widely owned. in Barbados, which is funny because that's kind of what we're talking about. I think it had 210 or 220 shareholders, and they're all Bajans, but it wasn't making any money. And so from 1968 to 1982, Sandacres, I believe, either paid one or two, definitely not more than two dividends, 5% dividends in that entire period, which is really horrible returns. So the owners wanted to get rid of their shares, but nobody wanted to buy them. And I saw it as being a really ideal situation because if you have 38 rooms in bad condition and you have 220 owners, it means that you can take out the owners one by one and not have to have a lot of capital to invest. I had a business before. I had bought over the banana boat property from Emil Strachan in Merrymen, and that was also a failing property. And by putting in, as Mahmoud said, by putting in a ridiculous amount of time, effort, dedication, I managed to make a few dollars there, not a lot of money. And I took those dollars that I made with the banana boat, and I started to buy out the actual owners of Sandacres. And the way they actually were prepared to sell their shares for the same price they paid for them in 1968. And this wasn't any sort of favoritism. It was just that they were desperate to get their money back. So that was a big help. So in other words, if I had $10,000, I could go and bought $10,000 worth of shares. And the bank considered that the actual property value was sufficiently good, and I had a track record some sort of a track record from turning the banana boat around. So I actually could take 10,000 shares and go to the bank and deposit them as collateral and get $10,000 loan. So I kept doing that. And over the period of about 2 years, I managed to buy out most of the shareholders of Sandacres. That was how I got myself started and got into the business. But I would like to say that one of the things that we're not addressing here at all and really needs to be addressed. Barbados needs to be much more business friendly. Barbados has a big problem in terms of the bureaucracy, the hoops that people make you jump through, both with CAIPO, with permissions from I don't know if that's changed, the town and planning department. It is really over the top, and it is killing business. It is stopping a lot of people from coming and from actually getting into business. You need to use lawyers for things that you shouldn't have to use a lawyer for in this day and age. A lot of the forms should be online. They should be filled out by the people who are entrepreneurs and sent into the department. And unless there's something seriously wrong, they should be approved. I was just told, and I don't want to quote this person incorrectly, I was told that they have an offshore company. This is some Canadian operators that have an offshore company, and they wanted to change either one or two words in their articles of association. And at the time when he spoke to me, it must have been at least 6 months that they were waiting to get that change made. And if we are going to treat people who are investing in Barbados, whether they be locals or foreigners, with that sort of nonsense, we are not going to be able to see the kind of growth in local ownership that you would like to see, because it becomes too expensive to hire a lawyer for every single thing when it isn't necessary. So I think that that's another area that must be addressed if we are to succeed.
Gordon, I want to ask Josea to weigh in on that, because I know that you've worked with several businesses and helping them to kind of get their feet and get set up. And you have projects of your own that you obviously work on. How would you say ease of doing business is in Barbados?
It isn't.
Okay.
And that's to put it quite bluntly. There is a part of the conversation here that I want to tack back to, in that for many people, many individual Bajans who want to get involved either directly or indirectly in tourism, we don't have access to families with money. We don't have access to relatives who can give us $100 or buy $10,000 worth of something and put it down in the bank. We don't have that. And a lot of it is working and saving on the same business. And in that particular instance, I think that what we lack in converting converting more ownership into local hands is in training. Because you've got a lot of people who don't necessarily work within the industry who pretty much want to try a thing. And they try something and they find a product that people like and they're good at it. But we keep using the example of Airbnb. And within the Airbnb platform, there's a built-in revenue management system that says you could sell this room at $35. And for people who don't work within the industry, $35, if I count it up and I get 7 nights, I said I just earned, what's that, $250 or something like that. I've just earned that. But the reality is in this market, that room was worth $50 because this is Barbados. You got to factor in electricity, you got to factor in all of these things. And a lot of people who are doing these as by the way projects, they're losing a lot of money that they can't see. And then they don't become further invested to grow the business and to expand beyond certain things. So I'd like, for those of us who can't get funding or who can't beg and borrow from people for equity and different things like that, that as an association, as a ministry, as a government, whatever it is, that training, that industry training beyond the tourism partners that are currently known, that becomes a priority so that everybody knows how to segue into the industry and expand ownership across the board.
One of the young leaders sent me the question of what are the literal steps to setting up a business in Barbados? And of course, it varies depending on the type of business, the type of structure. And I try to condense it into a few simple steps. First, obviously, you have to determine your structure. Is it sole tradership? Is it partnership? Is it a corporation? You have to register with CAIPO if it's a sole tradership or a partnership. If not, usually you go to a lawyer or to a corporate secretary if it's a corporation, and they take you through the steps of setting up your business. You have your meeting of your directors, you establish your bylaws. You do all of those things if you're setting up a company. You open an account with a financial institution, and here's where the berry needs picking. That in itself is a tremendously difficult process often. You have to obviously provide financial projections, or if you go to a credit union, you have to have your papers approved by the Financial Services Commission. You have to register with Barbados Revenue Authority to get a TAMIS number. I'm not sure now if they've married the company number and the TAMIS number, and if they're one. I don't know if any of you know of that. You have to register with National Insurance. There are many steps. And then depending on the business, there are all of these other steps. I know when I was setting up my businesses, if I had not been a Barbadian, if I had not been committed to the process, I would have just given up. Because Gordon talks about the ease of doing business. I know there's an official ranking for our ease of doing business, and it has us somewhere below 120. But we have to speak to the very harsh realities that it's very difficult to do business in Barbados, to set up business and to do business. Our licensing process for hotels is something that we could speak about for weeks. I mean, the process of getting your license every year requires that you go to multiple agencies, submit applications, wait on them to respond. Sometimes they respond late, and by the time you get one license, the other has expired. So the ease of doing business is something we definitely need to address in this country. And my question to you, I've heard of the single window, I've heard of all of these things. What are your suggestions as to how we make this better?
Oh, that's not a question for me, Renee. As Mood alluded to earlier, there's bartering in goods and trades and services. I have lawyer friends and accounting friends, and I have a bright mind, so we exchange services, so they take care of all of my...
You hand over those challenges to somebody else.
Yeah. In bartering, I barter my brain for their brain, and we live happily ever after. So you're going to need one of the other guys to answer that question, because it's not where my mind... we are good at certain things. I accept that I am good at certain things. That part of it, you build it, you get it registered, you get it whatever. I'm going to show you how to make the money in it. But before you get to me, you need your lawyer and you need your accountant. And I am neither a lawyer nor an accountant, so I use my brain to barter for services with friends.
So if you don't have those brains to barter for services for friends, what do you do? Because we're talking about young people, a lot of them, I mean, my young leader talked about setting up a taxi business. He talked about people who are interested in setting up concessions, in getting concessions. So he's trying to understand really how this thing works from a very practical perspective. And if you don't have the Josea brain, then what do you do?
I know, like, I have friends, you know, like, let's say in Europe, in Holland, if you want to start a business, you will get the funding, but it's a bit of mentoring too. So it's a kind of equity funding, and then people will stay with you to help you understand accounting, understand business, watch your business, make sure you don't squander the funding and so on, and kind of hold your hands for the first 2 years until you start to make revenue. So I think if we don't have a culture of business in Barbados, we have to create it. So we have to create institutions, EGFL or some type like that, where there's a bit of mentoring going on, to use older people who are in business and so on before, to help young entrepreneurs to walk that process. Renée, to answer your question about ease of business, we are 128 of the
Thanks.
190 countries in the world. And I mean, that is shameful. How did we get there? With all the lawyers and all the accountants and all supposed to be really good education system, how is Barbados there? I think everyone on this island should be asking that question, because it's a shame. We don't need to be there. And again, leadership. We need leadership to get us over there. Barbados should be in the top 20, at least top 50 of ease of doing business. If we could solve that problem, actually, it would sort of like create a more level playing field. Because it's very, very, very difficult to be an entrepreneur in this country.
I want to thank Celeste Foster from the Barbados Entrepreneurship Foundation for the notes I just gave you. But on their site, there's actually a tremendously useful list of supporting services for people who are starting out in business. They include, depending on what you want to do, the BADMC, Barbados Coalition of Services, but there's some really good, useful ones for upcoming small businesses, which include, there's one called the Barbados Youth Business Trust, and you can come into their office, pay them $300, and they step you through the entire process of setting up your business. Of course, there are the known ones like Small Business Association, and the Barbados Entrepreneurship Foundation itself is also a tremendously useful resource. So I'm going to point people who are interested in getting more information to their website, because I think it's useful for young entrepreneurs and people who are interested in getting into business, because they have a number of resources that you can touch on. And I was actually surprised at the number of places you can go to get advice. But the ease of doing business is a tremendous challenge for all of us, and I will agree with you there. And I know we talk about leadership, but the issue is not leadership. We have leadership. How do we make our leadership more accountable? Because we have these fora, we have these discussions, then what's the next step? How do we make our leadership more accountable? How do we ensure that the people that we've elected are transitioning us to the place? Because this is a low-hanging fruit. This should be something that is so easy to fix that we are, because I know, and there are many other of you, me, and Josea out there who are just looking to get into business on their own. But they are often stymied because the difficulty in accessing information, in interacting with government agencies, in getting things done in this country. So the question is, I think, how do we make, Gordon may have some comments on this, I'm not sure. How do we make our leadership more accountable in this process of facilitating business in this island, Gordon? Are you still with us?
Okay, good. I gotcha. Let me say that I think the number one problem for business, the bureaucracy in business in Barbados, is that the people who are making the rules and who are enforcing the rules often haven't got a clue about what it is or how difficult it is to run a business. And we really need to make sure, I see the government goes out and hires economists and so on and so forth. We need to have I don't know if you want to call it a business czar, but that person, the number one requirement is that they must have started and set up a business exclusively on their own, run it and made a success of it. And it doesn't have to be a Bajan. It can be somebody from Africa. It can be somebody from the other Caribbean islands. It can be somebody from anywhere. But they need to be accomplished, and they need to be in a position to actually move the bureaucracy so that they can get the things done that need to be done, and to clear out some of the barriers that have been set up by people. I don't think that those people are actually intending to make life difficult for us. for entrepreneurs, but I think that they don't understand how difficult it is to set up and run a business. So they come up with a new regulation, just willy-nilly, and they put it into effect, and we have to follow it. One of the things, for example, that affects all hotels in Barbados at the moment is that to get your license, your annual license, you have to have an inspection. And they like to inspect like about 20 or 30% of the rooms in the hotels. And we have been asking for years for those inspections to take place in the low season, September, October. But they don't. They take place in February. It's just absolute rubbish. And they want the rooms to be basically empty when they're going to make the inspection. How difficult is that? I mean, I think the BHTA should put it on their agenda to have that as a main item on the board of directors, to have that changed within the next 3 months. It doesn't take very long. It's just a matter of policy. Just change the policy. But that is only that's only one example. And the business the other thing that I would like to see at KIPO should be a private sector run organization. When I say that, it should be licensed. In Canada, there are lots of government type things that are licensed. The post office, for example, when I was there anyhow, most of the post offices were run out of local shops. You could do your business as a post office. There's absolutely no reason why KIPO could not be made a private sector operation and paid on the basis of efficiency, getting things done.
Okay, I'm going to ask Rohan if he can lend any weight to this discussion, because Rohan, one of the things that I think is most frustrating for people looking to start out business, and I speak from personal experience, is interacting with government agencies. You're a statutory organization, and I must say the level of professionalism of EGFL I have found to be exceptional. But I think you have a good understanding of some of the challenges that we face. And are there ways that we can make you guys more accountable, make our other agencies more accountable? Because Mahmoud talked about his project, but I know he's had a challenge getting funding for Cocoa Hill. It's a different type of tourism product. So there's nothing that anybody can wrap their brain around as to how this works. How do I finance it? How do we make this entire process more seamless for businesses and for people looking to get into business?
Renée, are you hearing me now?
I can hear you.
Right. I didn't hear the start of your question. Do you mind repeating?
Well, we were talking about ease of doing business, and I was saying, coming back to you, one of the obstacles we face often is interfacing with bodies like yours. And I referenced Cocoa Hill, which is a project that I know that Mahmoud has struggled because it is a very unusual tourism product. It's not a hotel. It's not anything that looks like a traditional tourism product or project. How do we improve your responsiveness, your accountability, and ensuring that we are able to access the resources that we need to get projects up and running?
Renée, well, I don't want to sound fortunately, but these funds are designed for specific purposes, right? The challenge is if the project doesn't fall within the parameters of the fund, then we're going you hear me?
You're breaking up and you're buffering a lot.
Yeah. Right. So I was just indicating to you, Renée, that if the project itself, the proposal doesn't fall within the parameters of the fund, then there are going to be some challenges because the funds are designed for particular purposes, right? They're fit for purpose, so to speak. So if you, for argument's sake, for one of the tourism funds, and you bring a project for a mechanic shop, for example, that's just to make it ridiculous. You will find that you're going to have some challenges getting the funding under there, all right? But the fact of the matter is, and let me say this, Renée, that there are a lot of people who have benefited significantly, a lot of hotels that have benefited significantly from the two funds, um, and some from our capital fund as well. The trouble is that a lot of those persons and businesses that have benefited do not go out shouting and praising and rejoicing and letting everybody know that they have benefited. They are the silent ones. Um, those who have had some difficulties for one reason or another, those are the ones that are most vocal.
So Rohan,
Those are the ones that
Rohan, I want
take
to say that I
word
would,
and messages out there.
Rohan, I'd like to say, as before you
Yeah.
go on, that I would like to shout and praise
Go on,
the
Renee.
Hotels Investment Fund. It is through that fund that I know a number of businesses in our
Well, thank you,
are
Renee.
moving. No, we cannot do anything but praise it, but we need to have access to greater types of funding like that. And that's why I referenced Cocoa Hill, because people who I know who have visited the project say it's a phenomenal tourism project. So how do we get those kind of non-traditional projects going? How do we best support that type of project? I think is what we are asking.
Well,
because your funds are fantastic and they've
you
helped a
would
lot
need,
of us.
yeah. Well, you would need to apply pressure, and in my experience, more often than not, change comes about when pressure is applied, right? If there's a great need for funding of a particular type, and that need is known to the movers and shakers in the financial industry, those persons who make decisions with respect to development banks like EGFL, Fund Access, and so on, then those persons are minded um, to develop products to offer to public, to offer to hotels and so on, and to new businesses to access funding in that regard. But if there's a problem, if there's a need, right, and the need is not known among the movers and shakers in the industry, those decision makers, not at my level, but way above me, then if that need is not known, it can't be met, right? So to get these kinds of products on the table, to get them available to those persons out there who may have unique ideas, concepts, and so on, and they want to bring those to the fore and want to make a go of them, but they don't fall squarely under any of the funds that exist, then it is up to those same persons to make those requests known, right? So that the persons who provide the funding, right, would see this as a need and therefore move in that direction to provide funding for those types of projects as well.
Some input?
The previous question was about the statutory corporations and
Ease of doing business.
ease of doing business. And sometimes when we look at complex situations or complicated situations, whether they need to be complex or complicated or not, to me the answer is broken down simply. We just need to run them like businesses. And it's not rocket science, because we don't need a consultant to tell us that. We don't need anybody to come in and tell us that. We need to run the organizations as if they're businesses. Within your own business, you set budgets, you forecast, you reforecast, you set KPIs, you do performance reviews and evaluations on how processes and how people work. Why? I mean, the simple answer is to run the statutory agencies as if they're businesses. If you know that you're supposed to do 80% of applications in 30 days, then we, the public, need to know, okay, they've passed this particular benchmark that was set. These are the things that are being done. We run it like a business with full public accountability. That's what we do every single day within our businesses. And it's the only thing to me that makes sense. We don't need to complicate an already complicated process. We actually need to simplify it.
I agree with you 100%. But getting from that mouth, that voice,
So here,
to actuality, I don't know how to bridge that gap.
all right, so
HR.
I have an idea. I have an idea. I can use this forum as a call out, if I'm allowed
Call
to.
out.
Put the camera on. I'm going to use this forum with hopefully the permission of the chair to call out our ministers of finance, our ministers of tourism, our ministers of small business and entrepreneurship to let me carry this discussion to another level using Rohan's suggestion that maybe you have to speak to the powers that be above his management or whatever, that we should start as a nation, as a country, to really look at entrepreneurship in Barbados and availability of funding, even if we put $20, $50 million a year towards that. I don't think the money will be wasted because it will be put into the economy and this thing called circulation of velocity. The funds will be spent and it will create jobs. And of course, we have to set up mechanisms and safeguards and so on. But maybe this is a call out to let's have a serious discussion among our ministers and our governance to look at entrepreneurship in Barbados, look at refunding EGFL. EGFL is a fantastic opportunity. It kind of works as a development bank without it being called a development bank. Let me empower the EGFL again. Let me empower the Shift Fund, which has tremendously, with some challenges, really helped the small indigenous hotel sector of Barbados. Don't let it die, please. And so I would like to use this opportunity. This is a call out to the powers that be. Let's try and create a forum for this discussion on another level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahmoud. As moderator, I'm supposed to be impartial, but I support that call out. I support that. I want to see that there are more small, locally owned businesses. Our tourism product has always been based on Barbados. And we have accomplished that through the fact that a lot of our hotel plant is locally owned. A lot of our attractions are locally owned. A lot of what people call community tourism and authentic tourism we have been doing since the 60s. And so I definitely support that call out. I have a few very mundane questions that I have to ask because they were asked of me. What are the benefits of BHTA membership for smaller businesses? I will speak to that. I think Mahmoud, you can as well. Josea, you're not officially a member, but I know you have been long affiliated with members. And Gordon, you're a member. You're not you don't consider a smaller business, but the benefits are tremendous. The lobbying is one of the main benefits of membership. We, as an association, do a lot of lobbying on behalf of our members and for causes that are important to ensuring the continuity and survivability of our members. I don't know if Mahmoud, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, definitely. Being a member of a larger group does help tremendously. First of all, you can lobby the state, you can lobby governance for sure. But like IHB or BHTA, we do workshops, we do training, definitely look at standards, standardization, you do collective marketing. And if, as the chairman of the IHB, if I could speak to that sector, because that's where my remit is, we are thinking about like how do we transform the small hotel sector into more future-proofing, becoming more resilient. And so internally we're having discussions, the idea of becoming a cooperative structure. We are looking at the idea of maybe having solar farms, a cooperative type of solar farm where we look at energy security, training, looking at bulk buy-in, to try and find resilient ways to reinventing yourself so we could survive. I think these are the type of benefits you would get from being in an association. Certainly the BHTA has, this kind of meeting is hosted by the BHTA. And so it is a very powerful tool to help with lobbying and get messaging across to the general public.
And did you mention networking?
That's big.
Big.
That is massive.
Talk about networking.
No, it really is. Imagine in this giant of an industry that we have that you're all on your own. It's very hard to navigate. It's very hard to find your footing. It's very hard to get best practices and to be able to progress on your own. The ability of the BHTA to bring people together, like-minded or not, even for discourse that asks questions, that forces you to push the envelope in terms of what is possible or not. All of those opportunities would not be possible without the organizations like this. As Renée said, I'm not an official member of the BHTA, but for a long time I've done training with these hotels. I've worked with them one-on-one on behalf of the BHTA, and things like that just would not be possible for individual people to walk around the island and visit 100 different properties. It actually helps with, for me, from training, from economies of scale, that you wouldn't be able to do at another level. But the networking is definitely, for me, the biggest opportunity.
Gordon, I don't know if you want to weigh in on this question, the benefits of BHTA membership for smaller businesses, which one of our listeners has asked. Is Gordon still with us? Gordon, sorry, I'm not hearing you.
It's probably muted.
Are you muted?
He's muted, yeah.
I think you may be muted. Just check and see. Oh dear, no, he's not muted. He's not muted. One of the other questions, which I think I don't know that we have been able to come up with a roadmap. Do this, do this, do this, do this, then this, and you will be able to accomplish this. Because this question is, how can you develop a competitive tourism product and get set up as a company? I think developing a tourism product is multifaceted. Josea, I think you're maybe the person with the most experience in terms of your expertise and how many things you have touched in your career. Can you speak to how you develop a competitive tourism product?
In building out products, the first thing is to identify the need or the opportunity. You have to see whether or not a path you may think is congested. Nobody can do a product the way that you can do it. You always add something different, so not to be deterred by any, what you think is an overwhelming situation. For me, and I think Renée would definitely stand by me in this, it's to do your homework. The biggest thing is homework. You have to go back and you have to analyze. What I find, and I've found for a very long time, and I've preached this over and over within the industry, is that we don't really pay attention to the data. And we always remember things differently. Like I remember Cricket World Cup 2007. And for me, that's the boost that we had in the Airbnb market before Airbnb was a thing. But people will remember the success of that differently because we don't write it down, we don't take the notes, we don't have any historical data to go back to. And in building it up, before you can move forward, you have to understand the intricacies of the business and the data that is associated with that. So once you've identified what is needed, the studying and the homework that you do then actually allows you to find the particular niche path that you will take so that you can differentiate your product from all the other ones that are already out there. It helps you to understand the pricing model that you must then take, because over the last year, from the time the pandemic has started, we've got a lot of these small bespoke experiences that have burst out in our industry, and they're absolutely fantastic. And the thing is that I remember speaking to a young lady who has a business, and she literally couldn't put that business onto a distribution channel, whether it's a Viator or an Expedia or whoever else is selling attractions, because she hadn't calculated her margins correctly. She put so much stuff into the product because she believed that's what you wanted. You had to have all of these things that are not core and fundamental to what was actually being sold, that she was actually giving away all of her profit. So now she can't distribute her very fantastic and brilliant idea any further because the pricing is off. Because we haven't done our homework, we don't understand the costs of distribution. So in building it out, we have to make sure that we've dotted all of our I's and crossed all of our T's before we move forward in actually building out. If not, we're just losing money and leaving a lot of money on the table.
That's one of your expressions that stays with me. I don't leave money on the table anymore, Josea. So thank you for that. Gordon, is Gordon back? Gordon, your mic was muted last time. Do you want to make a comment on how do we build
No, it wasn't. Hello?
Oh, okay. You're here with us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I want you to move on to this question of how you build out a competitive tourism product. Your views on that, please.
Okay, I wasn't muted, by the way, but I was trying to tell you that I wasn't muted and you couldn't hear.
I'm not sure if it was a technical issue on our end. My apologies.
Yeah, it must have been at your end. But I should have a signal so you can know that I'm actually telling you that I'm not muted. But as terms of building out a tourism product, I think everybody has more or less said what needs to be said. You have to have a plan and you have to work your plan. I think one of the biggest problems I see of many young entrepreneurs getting into a business is they don't seem to understand that when you get into a business, you can't expect to charge. You can't go into the roti business and charge. Sorry about that. you can't go into the roti business and charge the same thing that Chefette charges for theirs. No matter what happens, you've got to find a way to be just a little bit more competitive. And so that would be one thing that I would say. I also think that um, maybe the, the facilities for training or whatever that are available or funding should be possibly better, more widely advertised, particularly on Instagram or I don't think it's that expensive to do just local stuff on Instagram or whatever. But the young people are not using the traditional methods of like the newspapers, etc. And they're just not using them. So you need to reach out to them through the areas um, that they're actually looking at. And
Thanks.
and like I said, nothing is going to happen until we can make the ease of doing business. What I would love to see is for Barbados to come out, the government of Barbados to come out and say that it is their intention to be within the top 20 countries in the world for ease of doing business. And then every quarter to report on how we are doing from not just their standpoint, but from our standpoint, from the people who have to use the services. And they should be doing that on a regular basis and working towards that. That would make such a difference to the viability of Barbados as a country, to the standard of living of the people that are there. And it's just something, you know, just a very quick little anecdote. Years ago I was in Singapore, and I heard the president of Singapore at the time came out and said he was very dissatisfied because they were number two in the world. He said Japan is number one. Can you tell me if there's any reason why we should not be number one instead of Japan? I'm not happy with what's happening. We need to go for that number one position. I just loved it. I just thought it was just such an incredible thing to hear somebody say that they weren't satisfied with being number two in the world. And we need to go in that direction.
I have a question for Rohan, but in giving him time to come on and get all the technical aspects sorted out, I want to reflect on something you said to me when we started to have a lot of complaints coming out of COVID and coming out of the issues with persons coming in to stay. You said to me, I think a lot of these people are not getting the facts. You said to me, in tourism, we focus on if a towel, the number of towels in the room is correct. The details, we focus on the details. And that is what has helped Barbados be one of the leading tourism destinations in the world, because we focus on those details. And I think that is critical. We set ourselves targets, we focus on the details, and we check back to ensure that what we have promised we're going to deliver, we have delivered. And so I think what you've said there is really tremendously powerful, and what Josea has said, because that is really the key to us gaining that competitiveness, ensuring that all of our agencies are doing exactly that, focusing on the details, ensuring that they have delivered what they committed they'll deliver, and then checking back to make sure that the customer is happy with what they've delivered. So I have a question for Rohan. I'm going to ask all of you to just give me a little synopsis, but Rohan, I have a question online for you. Is Rohan back with us?
I'm hearing you.
Do investments aimed at building welcome stamp accommodation fit the criteria of the Tourism Growth Fund and the Small Hotels Investment Fund?
Welcome stamp?
Yes. I think I know the answer, but you've been asked by one of our online viewers. Investments aimed at welcome stamp accommodation.
Yeah, I see no reason why not. I mean, it is tourism. It's just long term. So there's no reason why that shouldn't fit the criteria. But Renee, I also want to add when it comes to efficiency, because the majority of persons there were asked about the efficiency of the tourism product. And I want to add that we have a fund called the Energy Smart Fund that is geared at improving the efficiency of the operators within the hotel sector. Those hotels that have outdated appliances and so on, we they want to update the appliances to more energy efficient appliances. Also, there's funding available under that fund for solar panels, solar photovoltaic systems. And there's nothing, in my estimation, that can have a bigger impact on the efficiency of a hotel than the reduction in the energy costs. So I will invite members of your organization and the hotel associated to, visit our website and do some investigation into the fund and see how we can help in that regard.
Thank you,
That's cool.
Rohan. I appreciate that. I'm just going to ask all of my panelists, we are going into the last few minutes. I'd like you to just sum up your thoughts on this topic. And maybe I'd like you to insert a little bit of what you think are the essential things for persons who are looking to get into local ownership in tourism. I'm giving you 1 minute each, so please stay good and honest. Who's ready to go?
I go first. I would say if to look at what your personal talents are, what creative gifts God gave you, and find a niche, find a small space. Don't try to be following, what the traditional norms are. I mean, like, for instance, kite surfing, tourism, or agro-tourism, or whatever. Find your niche. Find what you really like to do, and then make a product around that. Do your business plan. Look for your friends, your families to invest in your little business or whatever, and then start there. But find what internally you really enjoy doing, because then you don't call it, I'm going to work. That is life. Your business becomes your life. I would say that is how you should approach achieving a viable business in tourism. Find something that you really like that you could offer the public, and then build it out from there.
Thank you, Mahmoud. Josea, are you?
Yes. So I'd like to flip what Mood said around just now and say for everybody who already has a business, how can you make that tourism related? How can you get the tourists into your business that you already have? We're not building something new. We're building a new market. We're expanding the reach of your existing business. It doesn't require any additional capital investment. It doesn't require anything else. You don't have to go and ask anybody for anything. You're literally just remarketing it, repackaging it, repurposing it, and saying, you know what? The tourists will come to this. I teach dance classes. I'm gonna teach you how to dance. I shoot music videos. I'm going to shoot you a music video that you could put on your Instagram. I am one of the few people in Barbados that has a drone license. You know what? I'm going to do a drone photography tour because nobody else can do it. So start me on the East Coast on a cliff somewhere, and here is something that nobody else can do. There are a lot of things that already exist out there. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. In all of this and everything that we've learned over the pandemic is that everybody wants diversification. The diversification is there, but we aren't making the correct linkages to show people exactly how one feeds the other. Everything doesn't feed tourism. Tourism feeds back into everything. So let's make it a two-way street.
Thank you, Jose. Gordon, are you ready online with your...
Sure. Can you hear me? Are
can.
you hearing me?
Yes. 1 minute.
You are good. Okay. So I would like to emphasize that making doing business easier is super important, and send positive messages from the early school days. When kids are young, they need to be inculcated into the idea that business is something that's worthwhile attempting and doing and very possible for them. The civil service must have a goal to move towards every quarter to go for a lower ranking in the ease of doing business. That needs to be something that the government must put forward. We must move in that direction. Getting together for an investment group is not difficult. I'm quite happy to be involved with anybody who wants to talk about it or wants to see it moving in that direction, so that basically, and when I say that, I'm not talking about, I'm saying setting up an investment and a business that Bajans can use their savings in to get into shares of that sort of a business. There's no problem with that at all. And I think that you have to, don't be afraid to try to get experience in different areas of wherever you're planning to have a business. Try to get the experience at somebody else's expense. So you go into a hotel, you work in different departments, then after 2 or 3 years you step out and do your own business.
Super. Thank you very much, Gordon. Rohan, your
Yes,
final
ma'am.
thoughts?
I would just like to end by saying that I like the idea of that single window, and I know that's something that has been bandied around for a while. within the Ministry of Commerce, I believe. And it is very important that become a reality. Um, the other thing that I think is extremely important is those success stories, those persons who have entered into the tourism industry and have been successful. I think it is incumbent upon those persons to tell those stories. Let those others out there who might not have been brave enough or who don't understand the sector well enough, show them that I have done it. I have entered and I have been successful, right? What I think is that we have these success stories and we hold them close to our chests, right? For whatever reason. But I'm saying go out there and preach to persons. Look, I did it. You can do it as well. And we have the social media, as I mentioned before. These stories can be the social media because that's where the young people are, right? And we have to finally we have to look at different kinds of funding mechanisms from the traditional ones. Obviously, some of the traditional mechanisms don't cater to new products within the tourism sector. So I think it's important that we look at things like crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, and so on, and angel investing and so on. Those are older models, but the crowdfunding, as I said, I have a particular liking for that one, and I think these are things that we should consider. As I said, we need to have persons who can make a conversation around these things and put them into reality. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you, Rohan. I'm feeling very energized. So I really appreciate this 2 hours I've spent with you. I really want to thank my panelists, Mahmoud, for just dropping in here at the last minute and always with exciting conversation. Gordon, thank you for coming in from Spain to be a part of this discussion. And Rohan, Josea, your expertise, your knowledge, everything you brought to bear this topic, I'm sure my online audience appreciates it, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. To our production team, Andre, and your crew at Innovative Media, did I say that correctly? Innovative Media, and to A&B Music Supplies, as well as to Dwayne and the social media online support team. Thank you to the team here at Sugar Bay for graciously hosting us and for their outstanding hospitality. A special thanks to Ria and to Gail and all the staff at the BHTA Secretariat for their hard work behind the scenes. To Kathy Ann, my go-to and support in ensuring that all these things happen. To our media partners for being here in person, we appreciate that. We cannot operate virtually in our space, and we are glad you took the time to be here with us today. To all of our online listeners and to everyone who participated, thank you for listening and sharing your comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Thank you very much.